So you turn on frame generation 4 times, right? And let's see what happens to the latency. Wow, we have 100 FPS, but the latency is still 150. Hello, welcome to another Real Tech Talk. So I was thinking quite a bit more about these Reflex 2 thing from NVIDIA. Like, this is the feature I have been looking forward to the most out of all the features that NVIDIA has been talking about recently. And I think this is probably going to be the biggest game changer when it comes to hardware and gaming on the PC space for the next few years. Like, I think we're seeing like Reflex 2. I really suspect is going to be the new DLSS when it comes out and when it really hits the market and it starts working. Like if you remember just a few years ago, you were trying to like compare between the RDNA cards and the RTX cards, and most of the narrative was that you would buy the RTX cards for DLSS, which honestly, there is a huge argument to be made. Like, if you were really strapping for a decision, like you couldn't decide which card to get between RDNA 2 and what was it, like Ampere, like RDNA 2 and Ampere. If you're really struggling to choose and you went for the Ampere card, I think you were hugely vindicated in choosing that option, because the RDNA 2 cards have aged really poorly, man. Like, the FSR2 algorithm just isn't good, and it was really impressive how the gaming media, like all the tech media space, went from, oh yeah, FSR2 is already matching DLSS in quality. Like as soon as we had FSR2, the tech media was starting to praise how finally AMD had caught up with NVIDIA on the DLSS front, like the upscaler front. But even though NVIDIA was already improving DLSS a lot more, like we were already going to see DLSS 3 in the horizon. And it's really impressive how the tech media kept spinning this narrative, how AMD was already caught up with NVIDIA. But then once we start to get like the FSR 4 recently, sorry, and finally the tech media started to complain like, oh yeah, actually FSR 2 looked like, it looked like dog shit, which is, it's absolutely ridiculous how the tech media will manipulate you, trying to convince you, like gaslighting you into believing certain technologies are good when they're not. Like like the whole FSR2 thing was just absolute cope. It was absolute cope, man. And let's not even talk about FSR1. Like FSR1 was complete garbage, man. It's absolute garbage. But anyway, I digress. So Reflex 2. So if you have been out of the loop about what this Reflex 2 technology is, it basically works in a similar way to how VR works. Like VR, when you play a game in VR, it tries to render the scene. So the scene is like it has a certain resolution, but then you put on the glasses, and the glasses is just your viewpoint, which you're not viewing the entire frame of the image. But when you move your eyes, right, there is still enough image for you to move the camera around without any delay, right? So this is how they prevent you from getting dizzy. Like, you have the freeness to move your head, and they, with the information which is outside of your viewpoint, they can warp the image in such a way that you can still see around you without getting dizzy, right? Because if you force a human to turn their heads around and change the viewpoint at such a low resolution with their neck, naturally they're gonna get dizzy, right? So they use sort of this warping technology. You can think of it. But the main thing is that they are going outside of the frame, right? So you're actually rendering something which is outside. Now, of course, I guess they could directly implement this into modern games, but what NVIDIA is trying to do here is slightly different, which is assuming you do not change the viewport at all, but you have all this vector data information. What they want to do is when you move the mouse, it tries to predict, like it predicts how the camera should move, so it can track your mouse at the speed of your mouse movement, right? So it tries to maximize the camera movement relative to your mouse input. So to do that, it warps the frame itself. So it warps the frame itself and predicts what frames or what information is supposed to be in between the images, so it can produce the camera movement, right? And that is exactly what the Reflex 2 technology is supposed to be doing. So essentially what it means is that you can unlock the frame rate, like the game engines can be unlocked, like all the processing of inputs and everything, including your mouse. So you can unlock that, so all that information is available to Reflex 2, and when you move your mouse, it's going to try to fill in the data which would be needed to make sure that the camera movement is smooth for you. And if like the whole idea of this is you want to be able to aim as fast as possible, right? With with as much precision as possible. And this is what you can see in the Reflex 2 demo by Pure Dark. There are some artifacts here and there, and this is because it has to reconstruct information, right, to produce the extra fluidity. But it is extremely impressive because it's only having like 30 FPS worth of data. The engine itself is running at thousands of FPS, which means you have ultra low latency, and it's trying to, as closely as possible, match the movement of your mouse, which is quite insane. So of course, all these artifact stuff, I'm sure NVIDIA will have to find a way to prevent the artifacts from happening. I do not think that when the technology launches, it will have these many artifacts. Absolutely not. This is just a demo put together by a really talented programmer. But I really think that NVIDIA here is fighting a war against latency, man. Like I think the name of the game now is latency and how you get rid of latency, which is really a huge problem in the PC space. And it has been a huge problem ever since we started to transition from monolithic chips on CPUs to dual CCDs, because all these stuff they keep doing, like, oh, let's now make CPUs in chiplets. You have a lot of latency because now you have to interconnect the two CPUs and travel to like a IO die, and you have rings upon rings and cache upon cache, and all of that eventually leads to latency. So they put all this 3D V-cache, but when you go out of the V-cache, we are dealing with in PC gaming, we're dealing with a huge latency problem, man. Like most people, I reckon most people who just buying PCs and want to game, I'm not even sure they can actually even use XMP correctly. Like it would, like once we transition to DDR5, even XMP stopped being reliable, like it can become unstable, you can get crashes. And so it's like the hardware itself is starting to push people towards even more and more laggier hardware, if you understand what I'm saying, right? Which is like just to maintain stability, because you have all these stupid competing caches and IO dies and everything. It's getting much harder and harder to tune things. So it's pushing people more and more towards laggier and laggier platforms. And I think NVIDIA is seeing the writing on the wall. and they saw the writing on the wall already when they were having to introduce frame generation to try to overcome people with really laggy systems trying to get an upgrade on their GPUs. Like, for example, if you want to run Alan Wake 2 with path tracing, I'm not sure most people know that you try to run path tracing on an old CPU, it's gonna murder your frame rate. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a 4090 in there. If your CPU cannot process the all that all the ray tracing stuff fast enough, it's gonna murder your frame rate. And even to this day, like, you play Spider-Man, you turn on ray tracing to the maximum, and you're like swinging around the city. Like, ray tracing really murders your frame rate, dude. Like, and Nvidia understands that most people think that because you buy a 4090, you should be getting maximum possible performance. So the only thing they can do, so their products don't seem like they're not improving at all, is give you frame generation, right? So that's why we go from single frame generation to 4x frame generation, right? But it's very interesting. Like, for example, you take something like the 5060 Ti, right? The 16 gigabyte one, which is being praised by all the YouTubers as, the best bang for buck 16 gigabyte GPU you can get. Okay, fine. Like, sure, there's the 9060 XT, but I do not think if you're gonna play ray tracing, you're gonna buy a 9060 XT. Even though it has improvements, you still would want to go Nvidia just for the peace of mind that you can go back to the older titles with ray tracing and DLSS and play them correctly, right? And the 5060 Ti seems to be sort of that 30, 60, 12 gigabyte level of card where things should just work well. And I mean by work well is you can play it and you can enjoy it, right? So it's very interesting that I was looking at how this card performs in a game like Alan Wake, right? So this is someone testing the 16 gigabyte 5060 Ti on Alan Wake, and this is one of the flagship games with, I think it has all the Nvidia technologies. It has like ray reconstruction, it has path tracing, DLSS 4. Does it have DLSS 4? Whatever, you can patch it in. It has frame generation up to 4x. I think it has RTX Mega Geometry. Does it use direct storage? I don't know. Maybe not direct storage, but it uses all the Nvidia technology. So this is like a flagship title for Nvidia technologies. And it's very interesting how when you start to add, like, look at this, like in native, you're getting like 40 milliseconds of latency, which is, just, I would already feel this is kind of laggy, but I would still think it's okay, it's playable. But once you start to add more and more frame generation, it becomes absolutely ridiculous. Like, let's see. So does he enable frame generation here? So he's using Ray Tracing Ultra, right? So this is ultra ray tracing, and you can see you have like 180, 200 milliseconds worth of input lag running at 13 FPS. This is absolutely unplayable. Look at the latency, right? But let's say you want to just keep going, right? So this is 24 minutes. Let me see. So it's ultra path tracing DLSS balance. So you turn on frame generation 4x, right? So here it is, the same settings, 4x frame generation, no change in the settings, and let's see what happens to the latency. And you can see like, wow, we have like 100 FPS, but the latency is still like 150, right? Fine, like 100, but it's like, sure, you have the latency, but you have the latency from 10 FPS. So how does the game actually feel, man? Like, that is like more than double the latency you're getting at like 60 FPS already. Double the latency. That's absolutely ridiculous, man. And it gets even worse if you go to 4K. Like 4K, medium DLSS Performance 4 times frame gen. Let's take a look. So if you try to go to 4K, DLSS 4 times, medium settings. Let's see. Is this the one? Yeah, look, you also get like 100 milliseconds of latency. I remember there is one which is really, really, really bad. Like, was it 1080p? Like, I remember there was one result which is absolutely ridiculous. Let's see, DLSS 4 times. It's just, God, man. Like, look, okay, in 1080p, you still get like 100 milliseconds of latency just by using 4 times frame gen. Like, oh man, like it's so laggy, dude. It's just too laggy. Like, can you imagine playing at 100 milliseconds of latency? Just think about it. Like even comparing to 60 FPS, more than double the latency. This is like playing it. This is almost like you're streaming the game from like GeForce Now or something. But a lot of people are doubling down on the frame generation. They go and they buy like 2 graphics cards and use lossless scaling and put more and more frame generation. So it is absolutely clear that frame generation is here to stay, and it's not going anywhere. Like, people will not mind playing at 150 milliseconds latency as long as they see that they're getting like 100 FPS. This is the message that I think the companies are receiving now. And I used to think I used to think that this problem would only affect consoles, where they would put frame generation which you cannot turn off for certain titles. Like it seemed to be just a curse for the console players. But now it seems like it doesn't matter, man. Like even PC players who, like, just think about someone who is not tech savvy, who cannot see the latency, who doesn't know what happens when you increase the frame rate in this way. Like, someone who just wants to play games, they turn it on, they use GeForce Experience, the NVIDIA app, and it recommends them to do this crap. They're gonna think gaming is really bad, man. Or they're gonna get bored. I don't know. So NVIDIA is trying really hard to fight this latency problem, and I'm pretty sure that the answer is going to be Reflex 2. Like, the only way they are going to be able to fix this is with Reflex 2. So in a certain sense, like, I'm not saying frame generation is bad. Frame generation can be pretty good. Like, for example, 2 times frame generation, usually the latency is not so bad if you already start with like 90 or 100 FPS, even 80, let's say, and you try to, like, you use frame generation to fill in more frames for your 240 hertz monitor. I think it's pretty based. I think it's pretty good. But there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be suffering a lot because of this frame generation. And the only way NVIDIA is going to be able to fix this issue for people, like, we have people using this stuff in like competitive games, man. So the only way they're going to be able to fix these for these people is with Reflex 2. So we're going to be seeing like a techno nightmare in the future where people are going to be playing with all the technologies on, frame generation, DLSS, Reflex 2, and maybe they're going to reach 60 FPS latency by using everything at once. Maybe they can see like 300 FPS, but whatever, it's all fake, right? But it also means good news for the people who just want to play games with the lowest latency possible, because you can just get rid of the stuff that gives you input lag, and you will have hopefully lower input lag by doing so. But there's also the danger that developers are going to absolutely need these technologies for the game to work. Like, what if there is a game where if you do not have Reflex 2, it simply cannot work? And, Reflex 2 is a really aggressive form of frame reconstruction, right? Which is something that could really happen. Like, you just make something with path tracing set to ridiculous levels and require Reflex 2 for it to work. Like, I don't know, man. I don't know. So, we are living in interesting times. I think Reflex 2, like, if games did not keep adding obnoxious, uh, you know, requiring obnoxious levels of performance to run, like if all games never technologically advance too much beyond now, and we just added Reflex 2 on top, I think it would be really amazing because you can really lower the latency by a lot and enjoy the games. Like, it would be really good for latency. But if games keep being more and more annoying, where developers don't want to optimize their games and just depend on all these technologies for the thing to work, then I could see Reflex 2 just being an additional layer of problems where you're going to have more artifacts simply by the fact that it has to reconstruct the image even more, right? So it's hard to say, but the obvious culprit of all of these things is latency, man. And I think for the enthusiasts, like people who are into hardware, like you and me, I think we need to be careful and take care of ourselves and try to really understand how to tune the systems to have the least latency possible to begin with, because the games are going to be laggy. So you want to make sure that your CPU, like your system, can feed the GPU the most frames possible, so you can get your latency as low as possible without depending on these technologies, because otherwise the gaming experience is going to be pretty bad. And I think we're all converging to the same gaming experience as a console. Like, if you just look at the roadmap of all of these computers and new CPUs, it's all converging to the same level of experience as a console, just in higher resolution. And that scares me, man. That really scares me. Anyway, so that's just my thoughts on the Reflex 2 situation, but more importantly on what Nvidia is actually doing for PC gaming right now, which is fighting latency. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you feel like Reflex 2 is going to be a good or a bad thing for the industry? And how do you feel about latency being a big problem in gaming? And of course, there's a big discussion to be made about, we need to really start to educate ourselves how to tune systems, like at least minimal level of tuning. And I think we're at the point where XMP is not enough, man. Like, knowing XMP is not enough. You need to really understand how to tune the system, and we need maybe even companies start to, well, I don't think companies will educate consumers, but we need really some of the larger tech tubers to start to educate people in how to tune their systems better, because this is going to be a huge problem. Latency is going to be a huge problem, and if you cannot solve it, I think you're better off just buying a console, but that's just me. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next video. See ya.